Happy Thursday. I'm Allegra Ramos, your self care first brain science based productivity and time management expert. And today's topic is kind of a personal one. It's about really the impetus behind why I started my business, Beyond Your Wildest Dreams, coming out of the extreme loneliness and lack of support I felt as a new mom. So I will get into that in just a bit. But as always, I'd like to start at the top of the show with welcoming you all for listening. If you are live, I can see your comments. So feel free to comment. And even if you're watching to the recording or listening to the Harness the Power of Planning podcast, which this will go up as, leave a comment. I do see them. It might take me a little longer, but I will respond. And at the top of the show, I like to tell you some interesting facts about where my listeners come from. I'm heard in over 90 countries. And recently, Finland popped up into the top 10 list. So welcome, Finland. I have never been to Finland, and I found some really interesting facts that make me really want to go visit it. So there are two interesting geographical facts that I did not know. Finland has the most islands of any country, and also the most lakes. They have 179,584 islands and 187,888 lakes larger than 500 meters squared within its boundaries. That is amazing and also sounds beautiful. So I definitely want to see that. And Finland's capital of Helsinki lies further north than almost any other capital city. The only other one is Iceland's Reykjavik. So how fascinating. I definitely want to visit Finland at some point. So thank you for joining me from Finland. As always, I pull a card from my little deck of positive chaos, as I like to call it. I never watch them in advance. I never read them in advance, and I always just pull. Now, I did recently shuffle these for another exercise, so maybe we'll start to see some repeats finally, because I've literally never pulled the same card twice. So I always just pull from the back, see what's for me. It is better to live your own destiny imperfectly than to imitate someone else's life perfectly. The Bhagavad Gita, that's the Hindu religious text. Oh, God. That's a good one. It is better to live your own destiny imperfectly than to imitate someone else's life perfectly. So you know what that makes me think of? Stand-up comedy. And here's why. I first started doing stand-up comedy when I was in my 20s. And there were a lot of reasons why I didn't pursue it. All seemed valid to me at the time. Although now that I'm in my 50s, I wonder, was I just coming up with excuses because I was afraid? Right? How often do we do that? There's something that we want and we don't feel like we have the right to it, or we think like, who do I think I am to ask for that thing? Or we think it's impossible, so we don't even try. And so we talk ourselves out of it. And some of the reasons I talked myself out of it were, one, I hated, like, cigarette smoke makes me nauseous, physically nauseous. And when I was in my 20s, you could still smoke indoors in California. And probably you can still smoke indoors in many other places. However, since then, you cannot no longer smoke indoors. So one, that makes it a lot more pleasant for me as a performer, because it literally makes me want to throw up. So that was one of the reasons. Another reason was the gatekeeping of comedy back then. You know, before, the one thing about social media and streaming is that it's really allowed comedians to find an audience when the booker of a club says, oh no, your comedy won't do well here. So there was a lot more gatekeeping back in the day. And guess what? The gatekeeping was about keeping out female voices, diverse voices, so that wasn't fun. And three, comedy back then was very angry, mean, bullying. And I just didn't see where my style of comedy fit in that. And, I didn't see anyone who looked like me doing it. I didn't feel like I had any resources. Now, didn't look, right? I kind of just, oh yeah, I hear all these good reasons to not pursue this thing. But when something is meant for you, it doesn't leave you alone. And one of the things about my personality is that I don't like regret. I would much rather regret something I did do than something I didn't do. And so when comedy came back around a few years ago, I was like, that's interesting. And a lot of the reasons, right? Like, there's no more smoking inside. The gatekeeping isn't the same. And there's so many more people doing the kind of comedy that I like, the kind of comedy that I want to do. My excuses no longer were valid. And I was older and wiser. And I often tell my clients, like, if I have a client or a student who says, I don't know where to start with building my list of goals, I always say to them, start with the goals that you had when you were young, because those goals that we have when we're young, that's before we develop all these filters and fears and everything. There might be something there for you. And I always loved standing in front of an audience and talking. I didn't know stand-up comedy was a thing when I was a little kid because my parents never watched stand-up comedy. I didn't see stand-up comedy until if you heard my story, I actually got a fake ID specifically so I could go to comedy clubs as a teenager. I have no idea where I got this interest because no one around me watched stand-up comedy. So there you go. It is better to live your own destiny imperfectly than to imitate someone else's life perfectly. The Bhagavad Gita. I don't always feel like I know where I'm going with my stand-up comedy. I just know I love doing it. I love the response that I get, and it feels like it's part of my destiny, no matter how I do it. Whether I am selling out shows or not selling out shows, whether I'm the opener or the headliner. It's imperfect, but I love doing it. So, that was amazing. So for those of you who are joining me for the first time, I am an author. I've written these 4 books, and this one, my bestseller, is just now an audiobook narrated by yours truly. 3, 2, 1 done. 3 simple strategies to get your to-do list done. It is just under an hour long to listen to. The book takes about an hour to read, and you can find the links to where you can buy that at my website, bywdreams.com, because it's coming online really slowly. Every publisher, every website reseller sells it, puts it up, okays it, whatever, at a different rate. And so I've been waiting for it to go wide, but right now it's only available at 5 places. But Apple is one of them. Kobo is one of them. So if you go to bywdreams.com, you will be able to find my audiobook. Okay. And I don't know why I'm having so much trouble finding this URL, but right there, bywdreams.com. That's why I don't have it as a thing. So I've been getting over a cold, which if you're wondering why I didn't do a podcast last week, that's why. So thank you for joining me. Today's topic is about the loneliness I felt as a mom. That is really what led me to the path that led to Beyond Your Wildest Dreams and starting this podcast and everything. Because when I was a mom, I was one of the last people in my friend group to have a mom. None of my closest friends live in the same state as me. And I am not someone who had help from my family members. It actually used to make me quite sad because my child was part of a cooperative preschool, and one family member had to volunteer there for 3 hours once a week. It was a wonderful program. I loved it so much. If you have not heard of cooperative preschool education, it is a wonderful experience. And some of the families had grandparents, aunts and uncles who would come and volunteer for 3 hours in lieu of the parent. Maybe they had to work or they just had to do something else. And it was sad for me that I didn't get to have that experience. I had family who were close enough to do that. It just wasn't part of our family culture to be helpful like that. And, I, as a woman of color, especially as a woman of color who has an MBA, when I was getting my MBA, women were only 11% of this MBA student body. And as a woman of color, you can imagine I was even a smaller percentage. So I have spent large parts of my life in rooms with people who don't look like me. That's been my whole life growing up. And even then, I did not feel unsupported and disenfranchised like I did when I became a mom. I live in Los Angeles. Maybe people's experience, if they live in smaller towns or more dense towns, more dense like city type locations, maybe your experience has been different. But my experience as someone living in a more suburban type environment in a city that I've grown up in my whole life. So I know a lot of people and, have family in the area. The loneliest I've ever felt in my entire life was when I had a newborn. It was incredible to me, the things that I did not know as a new mom. Like the fact that I had never, until I became pregnant, I could count the number of times I'd seen a woman breastfeeding, on like one finger. I certainly had no idea like what an appropriate latch on was. Like, how can a woman get to the age of 35 and not know how a baby latches on? Like that, to me, as someone with an advanced degree, that felt like an extreme deficit in my personal education. The things that I did not know. And it just made me aware of how motherhood, especially for new babies, is something that's like, stay at home, behind closed doors. Don't bring it. I mean, look, you don't really want to go out because it's so much work and also immune systems and all that stuff, right? But it really is sort of this thing that happens behind closed doors. And I didn't become aware of that until I became one. And I was like, oh my God, where are all the moms? Like, where are they hiding? And that's when I realized just like how lonely it was, and look, I had friends that I'm sure would have loved to come over and be supportive, but their life just didn't allow it. And also too, I don't know that I knew to ask for it because I didn't know how, if I had a second child, I think that I would have been prepared. I would have said, okay, this is what it was like the first time I had a newborn. And I knew how lonely it was. And so I'm going to set up systems for myself because that's what I do. That's my thing. When I see a problem, I come up with a solution and a system, but I only had one kid. So I only got to have the one experience. And it was incredibly lonely. I felt like I didn't know who to talk to. And I also felt like, like I wasn't supported. One thing that one of the pregnancy books suggested was you're going to need help when you have a newborn. You're going to need help, with the dishes, with the laundry. Like, you're just not going to have the energy, especially, if you're breastfeeding. You're not going to have, I mean, my child, it seemed like she was on the boob 80% of the day, right? Like, when was I supposed to do anything? And also too, again, going back to immune systems, many, many cultures have a practice of not taking a baby into public for the first 2 to 3 months to allow them to have their immune system developing without being exposed to tons of germs, right? So I was doing that. So the book suggested writing a letter to someone and saying, hey, I've never done this before, but I've been told that I'm going to need help with this, that, and the other thing. Can you help me? I actually did this thing and the person told me no. So And I was like, okay, that's interesting. But I also didn't have any concept of really how much I was going to need that. So if you're a mom and you feel lonely and overwhelmed and stressed and like you don't know where to turn, you're not alone. Our society is not set up for moms and families, which is kind of strange because like it's just like that's the future, right? Like you would think we should be set up for that. And so we need cultural change, we need political change. Yes. However, all those things take time. And I want to focus on solutions that can help moms now and caregivers, right? So if you're a mom or a caregiver, if you're a dad, if you're someone, at some point in your life, you are probably going to become a caregiver, especially if you're female. This is just what the data shows. You're going to be a caregiver for a loved one, a elderly family member, a spouse. You might even become a caregiver for a friend or a neighbor who has no one else. It happens all the time. And caregiving, much like parenting, is not something that we are culturally set up to support. So if you're a mom, if you're a dad, if you're a caregiver, hear me. It is possible to find ways to support yourself, to do things differently so that if you have to, you can be the person who takes care of you. Because yes, I wish I had had more support, but ultimately I was able to dig myself out of the loneliness and the lack of feeling taken care of by taking care of myself. And for anyone who's been a parent, or for anyone who's ever had an experience where they felt like, that didn't go the way I want, redoing it is an incredibly healing experience. Being a mother myself has been an incredibly healing experience for me and has taught me things that I wish I had known sooner, like how to take care of myself. So this is why I always say self-care first and then productivity and time management, because I know that when you are in the thick of whatever emergency you're dealing with, whether or not it's having a child, whether or not it's a family member in hospice, whether or not it's a medical emergency of your own, I know that when those things happen, productivity and time management kind of go to the wayside. But self-care still needs to happen, because if you don't feel mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually filled up, there's nothing left for all the other goals and tasks and ideas that you have. That's just the definition of self-care. By the way, self-care is not a medical term. I'm not a doctor. I don't play one on the internet. But there's a wonderful article about self-care. I will put a link to it in the show notes. And one of the doctors defines self-care as, doing the things that you need to do in order to feel like you can go about life. So this is stuff that is not, optional. It is important for daily life. So thank you for joining me today. I just wanted to share that with you because I wanted to just kind of get back to basics and, speak to the people that are the reason why I founded my business. My kiddo is 16, and so I'm kind of on the opposite end now of being a parent. Not that you ever stop being a parent, but it's just I'm not in the thick of it the way I was those first 10 years. But I just wanted to come back and remember why I started this, because it's still nothing. Things haven't changed in the 16 years since I've been a parent. It's not better for parents. In fact, I think it's worse, because in 2024, the Surgeon General issued an advisory about parental burnout, because that's how epidemic it is in our culture. I feel like every year I see new studies about parental burnout, parental burnout. And guess what? Moms experience it at a higher rate than dads. And guess what? If you're a woman of color, you experience it at a higher rate as well. So I see you, I hear you. I have tips and strategies that will work for you because I know they worked for me. They got me out of burnout. And remember, it starts with believing that you deserve to be taken care of, and then stop looking for someone else to do it and take care of yourself. Thanks for joining me. Again, my audiobook is at bywdreams.com if you want to find out other ways that we can work together, either through my workshops that are available on demand or one-on-one. I love helping other people plan their calendars. That's like, ooh, Christmas for me. Go to my website, bywdreams.com. Set up a 30-minute chat. We can talk about how I might be able to help you. Thanks so much for joining me. And remember to like and subscribe wherever you listen. And remember, planning makes everything